The channel mixer effect is not very intuitive, quite honestly, and it does have a little bit of a learning curve, but it's a very powerful effect, and I think it's worth the payoff of digging through the trenches and trying to learn this puppy. Because it is a little bit more difficult than the others, I have a very simple, obvious example that will kind of break this down to its base level, and then we're actually going to see a more real-world example as we try to apply the channel mixer effect to real footage. Basically, what the channel mixer allows you to do is literally mix color channels. So if I wanted to put some of the green channel into the red channel, etc., I can do it here. I realized that initially that sounds very technical, but after a while it starts to become kind of a fluid process, and you'll see the real power of this when we get to later in this movie when we look at the real footage. So let's first decipher what's going on here in the effect controls panel. We have red, green, red, blue, red, red const. This is just crazy. What it's talking about here is the one on the left is the output channel. The one on the right is the input channel. And basically, in plain English, when you see red, green, what that means is how much red is there in the green channel. So if I increase this, then you'll see that our green star turns yellow. Now, that's kind of one of the more confusing and difficult parts of this is that you got to know your colors. You got to know how colors work. But I imagine if you're going through this training series, you're probably at a pretty advanced level in After Effects, and you probably know how colors work anyways. It's extremely important when you're working in advanced levels here to know color theory and how it works. In case you don't hear, I have Wikipedia opened to one of these like old school, when is this from? 1904, this like super old school color wheel. But we could see what's going on here. Here we have red and here we have green. And when we add red to green, it pulls it closer to itself, resulting in yellow. Now let's go back to After Effects here. And so again, when we add red to the green channel, it becomes yellow. And you would expect the same thing. When we add green to the red channel, the red star becomes yellow as well. So we're getting some expected results. Now, when you see this const thing, this basically means constant. So basically how much red is constant in the entire document. If I take this up, then we'll see not only will this star turn yellow, but red will be added to blue, making purple. And again, we can also see that in our color wheel here as we add red and blue together. They meet in the middle at, well, violet, actually. Look who's talking about knowing their colors now, right? Okay, so I'm going to take this back down to 0, actually. One other thing to be aware of is this red, red, green, green, blue, blue. This is basically just saying how much red is being used to make the red channels. By default, it's 100 red, red, 100 green, green, 100 blue, blue. We'll talk about this final switch, this monochrome, when we look at the footage in just a second. But before going on, it's important to understand what's going on. They were adding red to the blue channel with red blue, or we're adding blue to the red channel with blue red. Okay, now that we got the simple example out of the way, turn this layer off, turn on Cat 104. This is an Art Beats clip, and actually one of my favorites. I just love the colors and the architecture and the combination in this piece of footage. So now, let's go over to red and green. Again, what this is asking is how much red do you want to put in the green channel? So if we take this to the right, we'll get a lot more red because there was a little bit of green here. If you need to, I'm going to just go ahead and reset this. You could come down here to the composition panel and preview any one of the channels. So you could see red to see an output of the red light in the scene, the green light to see where there is green light being shot in the scene, and also the blue light to see where there's blue in the scene. One of the cool things about this shot is that these candles are so red that there's very little blue light, very little green light, and a whole heck of a lot of red light being used to make these candles. The power here is that we can adjust the green and blue in the rest of the footage and leave those candles untouched, which is dang cool looking. So I'm going to take this to RGB, and you can see we could play with the red here, and the candles are hardly affected. We could even take this into a negative, which will suck red out of the green channel. And that appears to have kind of more of a ugly tint to it, like a sick looking color. And so we can go through selectively and add blue to every pixel. You see what that looks like there. We can add blue to the green channel. Very cool. Now what I want to do is give you some numbers to plug in so you can see the power of this effect here. What we're going to do is going to take this beautiful reverential chapel that looks so sacred and peaceful with like the volumetric light coming in through the stained glass windows, just super gorgeous, the cool architecture, and we're going to turn this into a creepy like horror movie chapel where there are zombies coming in to eat you and stuff. So I'm going to leave red red at 100. I'm going to take red green to -50. I'm going to take red blue to -50. I'm going to take red const to -20. That's red constant. And basically, I'm using the tab key to kind of scroll through these numbers here. I'm going to leave green red at 0, and leave green green at 100. Take green blue to -20. I'm going to take green const to -3. Actually, I don't want -3. I want just regular 3. So I'm going to undo that, just put in regular 3 there. And then leave that at 0. Take blue green to 20. Leave blue blue at 100. And blue constant to about 5. With all of the negatives, we've actually taken out so much of the light that now we have a much darker scene. And we've also actually increased the amount of green and blue in our scene. We've taken out a lot of the sacred, peaceful red that made this so warm and inviting, and instead made this very cold and much darker. And now it looks like an abandoned church. And for whatever reason, there's these creepy red candles there. Here's the before and after. The moods are definitely very different in both scenes, but we've allowed the red to stay pretty much red. I realize this is tinted with a little bit of green and blue now, but essentially it's still very red. And that's kind of creepy. And it's a really cool effect. I love these colors. One final thing you can do with Channel Mixer, let me just reset it here, is you can check this monochrome box, which will basically turn everything black and white. And you could use these parameters to fine-tune how you're converting something to black and white. Yes, you can go into hue saturation and just do the quick and standard way where you just reduce the saturation, but that doesn't give you control over the way your scene ends up. But here, I could adjust red and green, and you see what that's doing to the background here. So if I want more detail in maybe the stained glass windows, I could play with red-green until I get a little bit more contrast there, possibly red-blue. It's almost like the black and white effect in Photoshop CS3, where you're allowed to have more control over your black and white conversion. So as you can see, Channel Mixer is a little complex, and we'll see the same type of thing in color balance coming up next, where it's just basically a series of color channels, and you kind of have to know your colors in order to get it to do what you want. But as you can see, the payoff is pretty awesome. You do have a lot of control that you wouldn't otherwise get with most other color adjustment effects.